Greetings everyone, Brad here with Mild Mannered EDC. Today we are going to look at a big knife from Kizer. That's right, this is the Kizer In Yan. Look at that, almost, I gotta make sure I can keep it on the screen here. It is as I said, a big knife. It's running about 9 inches. In fact, I think it is 9 inches from tip to tail there. So yeah, this is nothing to scoff at, but we shouldn't just judge it by its size, right? There's a lot going on with this knife. It has actually some pretty elegant design features and kind of some unique characteristics as well. So I think this is going to be a fun one to review. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll do a classic mild-mannered review on this. But before we do that, we'll talk some specs, just some kind of general overall information, and then we'll do a couple size comparisons, and then we'll get underway. So okay, so this is, as I mentioned, the Kizer In Yan. It is designed by a designer named Arsen. I think that's his name, Arsen. Don't know much about him, but there you go. Now, he is, I believe, or somehow collaborating with, there you go, Assassin Knives. You can see it right there. And so Kizer, this is sort of a joint maybe venture between Kizer and Assassin. I'm not 100% sure how all that's working, but that's what you've got. You got a designer, you've got this sort of other brand, and then you've got Kizer. So whatever, make of that what you will. Now this large knife will cost you anywhere kind of between $70 to $80. I think seems to be where this will be going as it becomes more widely available, assuming it will become more widely available. It's on a few knife retailers now, at least at the time of this video. So yeah. All right, let's do a couple of let's start with some specs, shall we? Okay, as I mentioned, yeah, 9 inches overall, right? Well, how big's the blade? Well, the blade is 3.875 inches. So you almost have a 4-inch blade here. That's a pretty good sized blade. And you have a blade thickness on that of 0.14. So pretty thick blade stock. You've got a handle length of 5.125 inches. And interestingly, and this gets to what I was talking about a little bit earlier about some of the design elements, it's less than ½ an inch thick, which for a knife this size isn't always going to be the case. Usually you're just going to get beefy and chunky all around. And this one isn't. It's 0.48 inches, so it is, just under ½ an inch thick. Yeah, and that we'll talk about that as we get to sort of carry and some of the other ergo features and whatnot. So when we get to that part of the review. Okay, I mentioned 9-inch overall and a weight, 5.42 ounces. So 5.42 ounces is not a lightweight knife, right? Even for a knife this size, but well, even for a knife this size, it's actually not that bad. And it doesn't feel, I know this is such a knife, such a knife person thing to say, but it doesn't carry that heavy. Let me put it that way. It's definitely, not a lightweight knife, but it doesn't carry as heavy as you might think it would. So anyways, all right, how about a couple of size comparisons on this In Yan? Make sure I'm on the camera here. There we go. All right, how about a Civivi Backlash? There you go. And then how about a full-size Swiss Army knife? No, I'm just kidding. That's the classic. Actually, it's not the classic. This is a jet setter. I know, bad attempt at a joke. You get it. It's a big knife. There you go. That's a classic mild-mannered Swiss Army knife there for you. How about another knife from Kizer, the Kizer Dukes? There you go. So you can see it's, the In Yan is dwarfing the Dukes. And then maybe another kind of standard bigger knife out there. How about the Ontario Rat #1? This is obviously my Spidey Rat version of that. So you can see even considerably bigger than the Ontario Rat. Although, and this is where I think, again, it gets kind of interesting. When you look at it like this, it's actually, if it's not, it's right on par. I think you could say, let me see if I can do that better for you. It's not really any thicker than the Rat #1, and the Rat carries very well for a knife its size. So again, something to think about there. So, okay, maybe on that point, let's talk about the Backlash. So we got the Civivi Backlash here. The Backlash is thicker. It's just flat out thicker, especially when you add on that big clip. So again, I know I keep hammering on that, but I think that makes a big difference on whether this is a knife you're going to want to keep in your pocket or not. So There you go. All right, let's go ahead and get stuck in with a classic mild-mannered review. When we do a classic mild-mannered review, we will talk about the blade, we'll talk about the action, scales and hardware, and then ergos and carry. So let's start with this blade. Boom, there it is. All almost 4 inches of N690 steel. N690 steel, it's a fine budget steel. I think it's in that VG10 sort of territory. And there's a blade steel marking there. It's fine. I mean, I don't know that I know that, I could tell you the huge amount of difference between that and maybe some of the other budget steels out there, or that I could tell a difference in use or things like that. Some people might be able to tell you that. I don't know. But it's fine. It's a fine steel. And it definitely seems like for the Vanguard series that Kizer is using these days, that's definitely a steel they are gravitating more and more to kind of keep those prices under $100, even for big knives like this. The N690 plays a big part in that, no question, because some of the other materials are pretty nice, actually. So, I mean, well, and that's not to say it's not a nice steel. It's a budget steel. So there you go. All right, enough rambling on. All right, you've got a pretty interesting design with a very sort of dramatic swedge there at the top of this drop point blade, a nice flat grind, and sort of a black coated, tumbled, stone-washy kind of look there on both sides. I think you can see it pretty well that way. A little bit of jimping. It's pretty muted, pretty smoothed off. In fact, everything is pretty well chamfered on this. In fact, I've been noticing that a lot on some of the new Kizers that have been coming out. They're really paying attention to those details, and I appreciate that, and it's worth mentioning here. Very nice choil, always important, well in front of the plunge line, and, evenly ground on both sides. Came very sharp, and I'll do another gross knife guy thing. There you go. There's some mild-mannered arm hair for you.
It got weird, didn't it?
Yeah.
So, and I actually have carried this a bit, and as I always do with all my reviews, but I've carried it, I've done some cutting with it. I actually tore through a pretty good pile of cardboard just the other day. Still pretty darn sharp. So, overall, nice blade. It's got quite a few little markings on it for a blade its size, but they're generally pretty discreet. Assassin, In Yan, serial number from Kizer, blade steel, Kizer logo. There you go. It's all there. But I actually think the color scheme of this actually works pretty well with the black, the logo, the micarta here, the G10 here, and we'll talk about that. So anyways, there you go. That's what you've got with this big blade. It's a bruiser of a blade. It's going to be able to do a lot of work for you, but it's not going to be able to, it's not going to be one of those blades that's like, it's just so big and chunky, it's not going to be able to go through anything. It's actually a pretty darn good slicer. And for a knife, especially with stock this thick, I was impressed. So good blade. All right, action. There you go. And you just saw that. Riding on caged ceramic ball bearings, action is good. It's very good. I will say this. I wouldn't expect less from Kizer, especially considering the size of this blade. It's one thing to flip it open. It's another thing to drop a blade this size should not be difficult, and indeed it is not. Now, you saw me opening it. This is where the uniqueness on some of the elegance of this knife sort of starts to come in. You notice here you sort of have this inline flipper tab is kind of the way they're talking about it. And once it's open and deployed, it disappears, right? You don't see any of that flipper. I like that a lot. I think that's a really cool design. I also like the fact that it's very low key, compared to this, or compared to, I think, Kizer's biggest flipper tab, which is on the Dukes here, which is another very good knife, by the way. But for a knife this size, to not need a big giant flipper sticking out to deploy, yeah, that's pretty cool. It's like I said, it's sort of the elegance of the design there. Now, it is a bit unique though, and I'm going to show you why. It flips just fine, and the detent is quite dialed. It's quite dialed in, especially for a blade this size. Winging out a big old piece of steel like this. But yeah, I mean, and it's just about every time. Now, the trick though is this is not a push button. If you try to do push button, that's what you'll get. And if you try to just do a short light switch, you'll get this. Do you see that? I'll do it again for you. Yeah. See how the blade tang comes up and it wants to hit you. So you've sort of got to do what I call, what I'm sort of calling the pull and run, right? Which is you pull and then make sure your fingers sort of running off the back of the knife there, because you don't want to get caught there. And that's not all that unintuitive, but when you do it, yeah, there you go. And you get a very authoritative, I'll put it up to the mic here, thwack. Yeah, quite nice. And as I mentioned, the closing action, oh yeah, it's very satisfying. So, overall, the action on this is very nice. And again, if you can, make sure you're not, doing the push button or getting yourself caught up doing this business, get that finger out of there, let it run along the back of the knife there. You'll be happy with it every time. Once you kind of get used to that. And I think the benefit of not having that flipper tab sort of, once it's deployed, yeah, very, very cool. So anyways, I like the I like the action on this knife quite a bit. It is a whoopsie daisy as I fail it twice. It is a liner lock. We're talking maybe 25-30% lockup. Very secure. There was zero blade rock, zero blade play, and I'll be honest with you, almost every Kizer I've ever had has not had those issues. It's the rare Kizer that I think runs into those. So while not every Kizer has beautiful action, they're getting pretty darn good at it these days. They certainly were good at it kind of in their older days. They went through kind of a weird period, but they're definitely back at it. So yeah, really enjoying this action. It's a lot of fun, especially once you kind of get used to how you need to deploy it. So there you go. All right, enough of that. All right, let's talk scales and hardware. So scales, we've got a micarta, very, very nice micarta. This comes in a couple of flavors, I believe. I want to say you can get, I don't know, there's an orange one, but I don't know if that's orange G10. But anyways, there's an orange version. You can get this micarta that I have, which is sort of this black and tan kind of micarta, which is done quite nicely. And then you have this G10 bolster area. It's sort of made to look like micarta, and so it flows pretty nicely. The seams are pretty darn good on it for a $70 knife, and meeting micarta and G10 is not the easiest thing to do. So in terms of, not having any gap, because micarta has a bit of a want to, have that little bit of a soft fray on the end. So there you go. But, you've got pivot, screw, 4 screws to hold this knife together. I'm not complaining there. No problem there. You've got stainless steel liners. Obviously, it is a liner lock. I wish you could, I should just, there you go. You got a lot of lightning holes in these. And even, let me see if I can show you. Come on, show up. Can't really, there you go. See those on the bottom row there? Put my finger, there you go. They've done a bunch of lightning here, and they didn't have to do that. They could have just left this a big, heavy bruiser of a knife, but they didn't. They went through a lot of effort to try to get this as light as they possibly could. I suppose they could have used titanium or something, but then it also would have been 3 times the cost. But for a knife this size, as I mentioned, coming in at that 5 ounces, yeah, that's nothing to complain about there at all. And then, as you know, you've got a stainless steel pocket clip. And you know what? I'm sorry, I missed the G10 backspacer here as well. So that's what you've got, scales and hardware. If you like the looks of this, there you go. All right, now, as I was talking about clip, let's get into ergos and carry. The ergos on this, very good. They're just very good. One, because it's so big, but 2, the design of it is very sort of, it's got a bit of a, sort of finger mold or whatever you want to call those, but it's done in such a way that it actually feels, your hand just sort of naturally locks in there. It feels really good. There's a little bit of a hot spot here off this clip, but excuse me. I'm not blaming the clip too much, because it's actually a pretty darn nice clip, and they've made this and they've tried to make this a pretty deep carry knife. So there you go with this clip. But the ergos in general, and again, ergos, I know I've said can be subjective, but the ergos on this are really pretty darn good, which you'd want for a knife this size. If you're going to be wearing gloves or whatever else, you're going to be locked in, no problem. And your thumb just, boom, right on this jimping, or right up here on the top of on the spine part of the blade. It just feels great, and is just sort of natural. Yeah. Ergos are good. Good ergos. And carry. So let's talk about carry. This actually carries quite well. This is a nice clip with good spring to it, and because it's on this micarta, you're not running into any issues, but I'll kind of show you here with the handy Hank. Look at that. For a 9-inch knife, that's all you're going to have sticking out of your pocket. Kind of hard to argue with that. And again, as I said, this knife carries surprisingly well. I enjoyed it. I've carried it way more than I thought I would. Like I said, I'm not this is definitely a bit bigger than I would normally carry, or even consider carrying on a regular basis. But I did carry this more often than I thought I would, just because it was it was fun to play around with. It was fun to use, and it just carried really, really well in the pocket. So, points all around for that. So, all around, this is a good knife. This is a good knife by Kizer, especially if you are interested in a big knife. If you are looking for a big, beefy knife that can do a lot of good cutting, but that will look nice, will carry well, has a nice action and some sort of elegant design features, this is definitely one you want to check out. I think this would be really interesting if they did a, excuse me, I have something stuck in my throat there. I think this would be interesting if they did an upscale version of this with titanium and maybe some M390 or, some kind of higher end level steel. But overall, nicely done. It's a cool knife. So there you go, the Kizer In Yan. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at this knife. It's a cool knife, and it's definitely one I enjoyed having on the table and in my pocket for review. With that, stay safe out there. Be mild-mannered to one another, and all the best.